Hey there, risers and thrivers. Welcome back to On the Up and Up, the podcast created to encourage critical conversations, amplify the untold stories and achievements of the underrepresented and underestimated, and inspire visionaries to take the next steps to pursue their dreams. I'm your host, Janine, and before I introduce today's guest, I have a question for you. What do you think relationships and the entrepreneurial journey have in common? Well, a lot more than you think, which is why I'm excited to introduce you to this episode's guest, Daniel Hanemann, who is of Taiwanese German descent, but grew up in Hong Kong before moving to Germany after high school to start his studies at our alma mater, WHU. Over the years, Daniel has had some really remarkable achievements, such as becoming a CFO at 23 and founding Wonder Tax in 2016. Of course, the entrepreneurial path has never been a smooth one, but he walks us through his journey and how he inevitably returned to his first love, Wonder Tax, in 2022. So let's jump straight into the episode. Daniel, how'd you get started with Wonder Tax?
Basically, we started out with, you get a massive tax credit as a student in Germany if you did your master's, or if you did an apprenticeship before your master's, before your bachelor's, you can massively deduct taxes from and create like a loss carry forward, which is basically a tax credit where you get all your taxes back once you start working. And we started with that with the very charming name of Studentensteuererklärung.
It's a very literal name.
It is a very literal
name. For
name.
those of you who don't speak German, that is student tax returns, basically.
Basically, yeah. Germans love the name because they're like, oh, it is the Studentensteuererklärung.
Yeah. Germans love anything practical. That's what we call gloves, Handschuhe, right? Yeah. It's like just practical, easy, makes sense.
Pragmatic.
Yeah.
Descriptive. That's
yes.
That's a favorite. No, so we started out with that, and we really saw how like our once we had this MVP, which was you could only do your tax your study costs, and that's basically it. We didn't have any features like, I don't know, freelance income or rental income, like all these different types of more complicated things that you would have like once you start working. But we started with student tax returns, and it really went viral. For those that remember, like we started out with like posting it in Facebook groups, first semester University of Augsburg or something like that, and then we would post that, and it really went viral, and we got a lot of customers at the very beginning. And then we basically scaled from there and started all these different portals, all these different programs for different employee groups, all these demographics. And lo and behold, the most interesting, the most potent one was the generic, tax return for employees.
And could I even rewind a little bit? And I'm going to rewind even further, but I'm going to finish with Wonder Tax first. How did you even come up with the idea of student tax returns? I mean, it sounds, and what I do like about some ideas is that some ideas are just so obvious. And to me, that's like, oh, that makes sense to digitize something like that. And like, it makes sense. But at that time, how did that idea come to be?
So it was it was really just us seeing a problem, right? Like we were told at university, there are these seminars at German universities being like, oh, you can, deduct all these taxes, all these costs from your tax return. And then you have these massive seminars and they give you all this information, but they don't actually tell you how to hand in your tax return. At the end of the seminar, you get this piece of paper where they try to sell you a, what is it called? Like a disability insurance? Like if you...
this like Betriebsunfähigkeitsversicherung.
Berufsunfähigkeitsversicherung.
Berufsunfähigkeit, yeah.
So if you can't work, you just get like a fixed amount of money each month. So they try to sell you that, and we were like, after university, I still hadn't done my tax return for the university years, but once you can do it 7 years, you can do it 7 years retroactively. So once I actually tried to do it myself with ELSTA, with the government program, it was just like, oh man, this is awful. So me and my co-founder back then, we just sat together and we were like, okay, this is like, we're onto something here. Like we looked at the market, we segmented the market. There was not a single program, not a single company who did it specifically for students. So we were able to, we just built this. We tested it out. Of course, like at the beginning, the investors or like potential investors were all like, oh, this is like only student tax returns. And then we like, flipped it and just said tax returns as a whole. And yeah, no, like, I mean, I didn't grow up saying like I wanted to do taxes, right? Like,
yeah. And that was going to be my question, because I mean, I have that feeling as also a WHU alumna. I feel like the energy at the uni is a lot of people wanting to become entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
But I want to take it back to even when you were younger and everything. Did you grow up saying, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur? Or was that something on your radar even to start with?
Well, probably yes, but I didn't have the words to, to say it out loud, I would say, because growing up in Hong Kong, there's not much entrepreneurship around you.
Oh, interesting.
So Hong Kong is very much, it's very, very, like the financial industry is very big, logistics. My father was he worked at Metro, like the cash and carry group, in sourcing. So there was a lot of that going on in Hong Kong, but there was not a lot of like entrepreneurship as a entrepreneurship per se. But I would say like I was always interested in, like innovation, and, my dad watched the Apple keynotes where the iPhone was presented and stuff like that. So it was always like a thing for me, like new technologies, what are like innovations out there. But so yeah, it was always there, it was always cooking. But once I moved to Germany, to the WHU, it was really like, that's when those thoughts became more concrete.
Okay.
Definitely.
But so question around that though, because I understand the environment in Hong Kong wasn't so entrepreneurial. So you weren't really surrounded by it. And I understand that your mom's from your mom's Taiwanese, but you grew up in Hong Kong, your dad's German. And I understand the urge to move to Germany, but also Germany is not really, it doesn't really feel like the most entrepreneurial place either.
No.
So, I mean, I get why you would choose to come to university here, but was there a reason why you chose WHU and coming to Germany specifically, where you could have maybe gone to the States and had a more entrepreneurial environment? I
mean, it's like, like looking back, you could spin a story that was like all planned and everything, but it definitely wasn't. I attended German Swiss International School in Hong Kong, so I did do an Abitur. So I did always have lessons in German, and to me it was always clear that I would be, like studying in Germany. I did look at, US universities and UK universities and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, like I didn't really follow through in actually applying for any of them, because to me it was always pretty clear that I would go to Germany. Like, I mean, it's also about like, cultural roots and everything. I mean, who am I talking to here, right? She, like my mom, she was also like, okay, you have to go back. You should go back, because I never grew up there. Like I spent 2 years in kindergarten in Düsseldorf, but I actually, basically the only time I spent there was every summer. Like, summer camp and just visiting relatives, but I've never actually lived there. So it was always like the thing. But yeah, no, of course, like it was just a thing I was supposed to do. And how I got to WHU was basically a guy from my school. His dad was a headhunter, and he was like, oh yeah, you should probably look at that. And then
I see.
He also went to WHU.
Yeah.
But no, I also applied for other universities, and I just liked it the most, I guess.
And did you visit WHU before?
No.
Okay.
I only did the assessment center.
Oh, interesting.
I saw it once. I mean, it was a bit of a culture shock.
I was going to say, that's a complete blank slate. I know my culture shock when I first came to Germany without having anything. So how was that for you? I mean, because at the same time, you are aware of the German culture. You experienced it through your father, but now you've come to do your studies, which is also an interesting point in your life, because it's the first time you're completely on your own too, right? I mean, you're all of a sudden an adult in a new country, doing your own thing. That's a tough.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, starting university is always tough, right? But like there were a few extra dimensions to it, right? Like because I was very far from home, I guess so were you. So, suddenly living by yourself and having to deal with what is an internet bill, what is a, like electricity bill. I have to register. What? I have to register at the
burger arms.
At the city center, and it's just like at the town hall, and it's just like there was just so much to think about. And my parents were, thousands of kilometers away. I went from, like 8 million population to 8,000. And that was tough. Like, I'm not going to lie. The first year was really tough. Also, just a new environment. None of my relatives, my dad, my mom, nobody's studied.
Around.
I'm the first. No, studied even.
Studied.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
wow.
Nobody went to university. I was the first one.
Wow.
In my family to go to university. So to me, it was also a lot like, I don't know, like no shade to my dad, but like he said, oh yeah, if I'm stressed, I just go for a run. And I'm like, well, thanks, but like there's no, I can't, like I did go for a run. Like it did help, but there was no like the friend that I talked about, like, he also, his dad like helped him choose courses and stuff like that.
And you didn't have
like,
that support from your family to fully, because they didn't understand what you were up
exactly.
to.
So to me, it was quite a culture shock. So the first year was quite tough.
I can relate to it because it's a tough environment to be in. I mean, I grew up outside of Philadelphia. High school, my graduating class was 1,000.
Yeah.
And then I go and do my bachelor's in Bad Honnef, where I think there's probably maybe 500 people max. I think in my class we were 10 people in my marketing course or something like that. Yeah. It was nothing. It was a complete 180 for me. And I think it's also so hard during that time because you're young and you think you know everything, but you know nothing. It's the first time being completely on your own. Yeah. You don't really know who you are yet either. You don't fully get the whole adulting thing. And then you're also supposed to be here developing your career. Yeah. It's like everything piled on at once. Yeah. Like I always say to my mom, the way it felt to me was like, so I was chilling on a nice like yacht, and then out of nowhere they just dropped me off in the middle of the ocean. They're like, swim back to shore, good luck. Yeah. It's like, wait, hold on. You didn't even give me a flotation device.
That's basically it. Yeah, 100%.
So how did you, when you reflect on that, do you feel like there were what helped you to come into your own in such an environment? Because you're figuring out a lot of things for the first time. And
I think adversity builds resilience, if you put it that, like, I mean, my grades definitely suffered in the first year. Like, I'm not pretty open about that, right? Like, I didn't have a great time in the first year, so something kind of had to give while I was figuring out life. And I think, it kind of builds grit. You just have to get through it, right? Yeah. There's not much more. Like if I would have told my past self, like it's gonna, you're learning, right? Every experience, every negative experience you're doing is like a learning experience. I would have probably told my older self to, bugger off.
Like, go somewhere else with that. I don't want to hear it right now.
I don't really want to hear that, but like it's true, right? Like it's true. You kind of learn how to deal with situations. I'd say.
That's true. Because I was thinking to myself, I was like, is there anything that I could have told my younger self to help it? And it's like, honestly, you can't. Yeah. You just have to go through the motion, and it sucks. And it has its ups and downs, but it does build your resilience, and you learn certain strategies and coping mechanisms. And I think it also loans into figuring out who you are and what you want to do in that process as well, which kind of leads me to my next point, because I always am curious about pivotal moments in people's lives, or what they feel are pivotal moments that have gotten them to who they are, where they are today. And so when you reflect on where you are now, currently Wonder Tax, CEO, running it, and you look back at everything that kind of followed or happened retrospectively, would you say there were any pivotal moments that stand out?
There are definitely a lot of pivotal moments. I would say what really was a repeating pattern in my life was always just, there's this movie, it's also a few years old now, called Yes Man with Jim Carrey. Yes. And it really resonated with me because I was always a person who would just be like, just say yes and just, eyes closed, head first. So, when I went to, it was with WHU, I didn't really think that much of the consequences of like, just the stuff that we talked about earlier, right? Like I could have been, it would have probably been smarter if I would have been like, okay, maybe I'll do 1 year of like living in Germany and doing internships or whatever, and just figuring out stuff. But it was more like eyes closed, head first kind of situations all the time. After university, at the bachelor ball, I was asked by a father of a classmate of mine if I wanted to, start at his company, and with that company, like they were doing beverage, like a beverage powder, and they had a partner near actually where was it? Near Darmstadt. They had a production facility in China, and there was a huge like trade fair in Chicago. So I was just like, yeah, let's do it. And
interesting.
And then I was.
And was that your first job out of your bachelor's?
Yeah, okay. Basically. I mean, it wasn't great because everyone was kind of insane at the company, but like it was fun. I mean, I was there. It was 3 months in Chicago, just like and my mom was so worried.
Really?
My mom was like, "Oh my God, you're 21 and you're like
in the U.S. Never been there. What are you doing?"
Yeah, you just pack like, well, what are you doing there? Like, you just pack your bags and you're just like, my little boy is just like
he's just up and left and just like, do you even know Chicago?
Exactly.
And that's not the safest city in the world.
There you go, right?
Yeah.
And it was, and she was so worried, and it was to me, I was just like, well, like let's see what happens, right? So I just said yes to that, and then I was back at. And then, like, it didn't work out because, like I said, they were all insane. It was just like it was very chaotic. Okay. It was just everything was very chaotic about it, and like it was money spent everywhere, and then like it also didn't work. Like, I just felt like for me, fresh out of university, I was like, what is happening here? Yeah,
and like first true work experience. Like, is this how companies operate?
Is this exactly? And then, like, I mean, the company's all like it doesn't exist anymore. And I went back to Hong Kong, and I was thinking about just waiting for my master's to start. And then my friend, who was in Hong Kong at the time, met him for a beer, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I'm here for Rocket Internet, working at FoodPanda. I'm supposed to, like start doing, like I'm supposed to run it here, and I'm here for 3 days, and it's such a restructuring case. It's insane. And like next week, he gives me a call, and he's like, "Hey Daniel, can you do finance?" And I'm like, "Sure."
Could you actually do finance?
I mean, I did fail the first time in university, but like, I was confident.
I mean, you passed the second, so.
I passed the second, right? It was.
You gotta know something. I mean.
It was great. Like, I was like, yeah, sure, I can do that. And then I went to, literally the next day I went there. Like, Oliver Samver just left the office building, I was told. And I started like cleaning up the finance department, and it was as a freelancer. And then, one thing led to another. The Asia boss was in Hong Kong. He was like, "Wait, this guy's from WHU. He speaks Chinese. He speaks English, and like, there's visible improvement over the last 2 weeks. Like, yeah, like make him an offer. Like, we have to keep this guy." So I was just like, "Okay, cool. This is nice here." Like,
I'll just do it.
I'll just do it. Let's continue.
How old were you at that point?
23.
Wild. Okay.
Yeah,
and so what did you?
That's how I became CFO of FoodPanda Hong Kong.
At 23.
Yeah.
That's kind of wild.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, there's people who spend years to work up to CFO level, and
I mean, it was we had a lot of drivers, but it was still like a small operation, and
but still,
operation itself is a big word for Rocket Internet because it was it was very chaotic as well, but it was extremely fun.
Yeah, sounds like quite the learning experience as well.
It was fantastic learning experience. If you ask me about pivotal moments, I would say a lot of the times it was just like, like a friend of mine asked me once, why do these things kind of just happen to you? And I'm like,
that was going to be, where I'm going with this as well, but you continue.
And it was a lot of the times just like saying yes and
just being open.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I just had lunch actually with a friend of a friend who's really interested in going into startups and everything. And like, I basically told him like, hey man, like realistically, what do you have to lose? There's not much, right? Like if you, as long as you know you're morally on the right side, you base your decisions without any, like fraud or whatever. There's, even if you fail at a company, right? Like it's not a death sentence. Like, you're always gonna, I mean, there are limits, but like even if you fail at a startup, you can still continue. You can do your next thing, right? Like is there any scenario where you're going to be existentially, where you can't pay rent, right? Like there's where you're existentially on the limit.
Yeah, that was going to be my question because, sorry, finish your statement first though.
Not like, I mean, it's a might sound like a very privileged thing to say.
Yeah, that was where I was going with it. But continue. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like we live in a country in Germany, which has massive, like, subsidies, and a lot of Germany's just very bad at communicating these things, and and to be honest, safety nets, right? Like there's like Gründerstipendium, where you literally get 1,000 euros a month for 12 months. Like, I mean, it's not a lot, but it's definitely, that plus a few savings, maybe even first funding, you'll definitely be able to at least pay your rent, right? Same thing with, there's so many like investment subsidies where it makes it easier to raise money and to also invest money. There's so many like these Gründerstipendium, these stipends to work with.
It's true. I agree, and I think one of the things I've always said is I feel like in Germany, it's very, very hard for you to just end up on the street with nothing.
Exactly.
And there would have to be some crazy, wild circumstance that would have happened to let that happen, and even then there's some security. But at the same time, a part of me, as you were talking about it, the thought of privilege came up, like, because I'm thinking, like, what would the average listener for the podcast, where I think for you and I, there's also an aura of, we were kind of set up in a way for success, right? I mean, you went to an international school, you have like the German, you've got Mandarin. You speak English incredibly well. You studied at one of the best universities to have a network. Yeah. So it kind of, everything kind of lined up very well. And I can relate to that as well for myself, because while I grew up in a not so great environment, I did have certain things that put me on that path. So for me, I also have that mindset where it's like, okay, what would be the worst thing that happens? Yeah. But I'll just be a little stressed out. But I'm trying to think from the average, because I'm not trying to say we're not average, but like from someone who maybe doesn't come...
Less privileged.
Yeah, from a less privileged perspective.
And I completely get that. Yeah. And I think it's super important to, count your blessings, right? Like I agree with every word. Like it's a very privileged thing to say for me. Because I know that I won't fall as hard as it's not as steep, right? And
I think even thinking to like having the title of CFO at 23, like that in and of itself. I mean, that's why I was like, there are people who've had years of working up the ladder who were trying to get that, who may never achieve it, and then that happened because serendipitously, with the circumstances, the opportunities, who you knew, what you studied, it worked out, right? So that's why I'm trying to think about it. Sorry, I cut you off from your point.
No worries. No, but like what I'm trying to say is like I get that. Like I'm the last person who would deny that. Yeah. Like I find it incredibly cringe if somebody who says that they're self-made and it's like, yeah, but your parents paid for your for your tuition. Like even like I would never say that. Like to a certain extent, yes, I am self-made by the fact that by virtue of like not inheriting like companies or whatever. But like I'm definitely it's set up, right? Like it was there were stepping stones to get to that self-made thing, right? Whilst people who don't have those privileges, it's harder. But what I'm just trying to say is, like, I would say there is also a psychological part about it, right? Because to me, like, just knowing that I have these things, and also like the German government and what you just said, is very hard to fail that badly, because of the German government. Just having that, you know, like in mind, and having grown up with, like, oh, you can achieve everything, is in itself, I think, already like a privilege. Definitely. But I think for a lot of people who haven't grown up, like, being able, like, telling yourself that, I think that's super important.
Hey there, I'm just jumping in to add in this brief break to ask, what do you think? I know that within the team, we had a discussion about privilege after listening to this conversation. And through it, we unpacked that this particular conversation doesn't highlight the challenges of having to deal with visa issues and residency problems or any other potential hindrances to pursuing opportunities. And it's fine. That wasn't a case for Daniel's experience, and it was neither the case for my experience. We had these privileges that helped us. And I promise you, in the future episodes, I definitely am having guests on where we are going to unpack these conversations and topics. But what I did want to highlight from this was Daniel's point of mindset. Personally, my biggest work in progress is my mindset. It's what stopped me from going after certain opportunities or not even being able to conceive of certain solutions. And it's definitely something that I'm working super hard to improve, whether it means going out and trying to talk to people that I admire who seem like they're pushing past boundaries, or working on just doing affirmations so I can get my mind in the right spot. And Daniel is right. Having the right mindset is a privilege, and that is something that is within each and every one of our hands to control. So that's my little 2 cents on it. Happy to get your feedback, so feel free to leave a comment or a review with your opinion. And with that, let's get back into the episode. Daniel's going to share a bit more about how he got to starting his own company.
I definitely knew by then that I want to be in this world. I want to start a company. I want to do I want to be in this space. Yeah.
Interesting. And moving to Berlin, was this also another one of those say yes, dive in?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I freelanced at Movinga. That was also like, you know, sure, I'll do what I did at FoodPanda. Yeah. This is great. This sounds right up my alley. Like a little bit insane, a little bit high octane kind of thing. So I went in. That was extremely fun. Did that for 3 months, and then Wonder Tax.
Okay, and so that was when Wonder Tax officially kicked off, and kind
of. So my co-founder like came up to me and he was like, "Oh, okay, this, like, you know, do you remember those seminars?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." And I was like, "I did that tax return a while ago."
Yeah.
And then he was like, "Yeah, me too," and it was awful. And then we actually worked on it. And we did the prototype with with 2 freelancers, and then we launched it. And we did, like I said at the beginning of the episode, we did a very viral growth trajectory at the beginning.
And TaxFix came up around the same time as well.
Yeah.
So how was that as a founder, knowing that's basically a one-to-one competitor, extremely similar to what you were doing? How did you feel about it, and what was your strategy?
I mean, it's no secret that me and my co-founder, we had differing visions where the company can go.
Yeah.
So I left the company in 2000. Spoiler alert! But I left the company in 2017.
Yeah.
After 2 years. So basically, to me, it was always like, okay, this market is huge, right? Like, it's everyone in Germany is able to or should be doing their tax return. I think there's massive growth potential there, and we had a lot of we raised VC money, and it was also growing greatly, but we weren't as aggressive as we could have been, because TaxFix did exactly that, right? Like, they very early had a beautiful app, right? Their design was impeccable. They had very clear corporate identity. They had very clear design guidelines, or design language, and we're very early able to raise money from Valar Ventures, which is Peter Thiel, and other US-based investors. So they really were collecting, those names, those VC brands, and they played the VC game perfectly. So I do stand by the fact, but like back then, our approach that made our investors invest into us.
Yeah.
I would still say that, even up till now, we have way more features than TaxFix has, such as, rental income, freelance income, and others. I would say, we're still, arguably the better product, but we always worked very iteratively, right? Like, we always tried to be that scrappy, productive startup kind of way, whilst they were solving things with more money.
Yeah.
Which has its merits, and obviously, them, raising so much money and being the size they are, it turned out that was the way to go. Right?
It also makes me wonder if it was a product of the time, right? Because I feel like the scrappier approach currently with the current ecosystem would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, you already hinted to it, you left.
Yeah.
And I don't really want to get too much into whatever happened between you and your co-founder. And it sounds like it was more differences in the vision at the end of the day that caused it. But how do you step away from something that's kind of your baby? And what was that process coping wise?
The process was all right, because we had, let's put it that way, we had grown-ups, we had our investors who were mediating between us. Obviously it's hard, right? At the end of the day, I kind of wanted to, obviously it was kind of okay, we don't really want to work together anymore, but who's it going to be? And it was also for the sake of, you don't really want, a lot of people, they're definitely way messier startup or co-founder conflicts, right? They're way messier because we left, everyone was, shook hands, everyone was content, at least.
It was amicable.
It was amicable. We left. We went apart.
And co-founder splits are also super common.
It is super common. It's the number one reason why startups fail, right? But we had the grown-ups. It was a very mediated session, and at the end it was amicable. And but it's difficult, right? It was very much you're stepping away from something you wanted to do, but it was. It was, at the end of the day, it was fine.
Because it is such a common thing that happens. And I know for myself, when I previously dabbled with an idea, I was working with someone else on it, and I was realizing it just wasn't working.
Yeah.
And it was really hard for me to figure out how to convey this to this person, because I was like, first of all, we're just not meshing personality-wise. My way of doing this and your way of doing this are very different. We don't have a similar approach. We don't have a similar vision. And it became really uncomfortable to navigate that. And I remember for me, I was perplexed because I was like, okay, what do I do now? Yeah. How do I bring this up? And I don't want this to turn into a fight, but I don't want to do this anymore.
But that's very conflict avoidant.
Yeah, that was of myself. Yeah.
I do, if I self-reflect, it's also a very, it's a pattern that I have as well, to be conflict avoidant. And I think there's no nobility in that. I think at the end of the day, and it's much easier said than done. Yeah. Is you have to just talk it out. It's a relationship like any other. You spend more time with your, romantic partner than with your. You spend more time with your business partner than your romantic partner, right? It's insane. Yeah. The amount of and intensity of time that you spend with each other. Yeah. And it's. At the end of the day, it's just communication. That's all. That's all it is. Yeah, But
I want to dwell too much on that, and I wanted to kind of move forward. So you leave it. Do you feel like you went through a grieving process or anything like that?
I didn't have enough time to grieve.
You didn't have enough time. No, you were on to the next.
Yeah. So the guy that got me into FoodPanda, he was like, "Hey, Daniel, you left. I have this thing where I." you know, I have this contract for running a co-working space, and I have no MD to do it. So, hey, do you want to do it? I'm like, sure, let's go.
Once again, saying yes and just doing it.
Let's go. And
okay.
like literally, I mean, literally, it was. I didn't have a single day in between, so like I literally dived into the next thing, and it was like retro.
Didn't
like,
you feel like you needed a break at some
yeah,
point?
I did. Like, there's no doubt that I needed a break. But the thing is, why I did it was just because it was just the urgency of it was just too much.
Okay.
Like everything was already behind plan and everything. So yeah, there was definitely a grieving process. I did in my free time speak with like, you know, my friends and everything.
Yeah.
But like business wise, it was on to the next thing. We started this co-working space, scaling spaces.
It's like a relationship. You're like, got the rebound. We're on. Like moving on.
It was literally a rebound startup.
That's really interesting though, because that I was trying to also wonder, or what makes me wonder about what you've said is, you were tired. You said you needed a break. So how do you keep your momentum going? Like through all of this, are you a very structured person? Because some founders who are like, I wake up at 6 a.m. and I'm going to work out and I meditate. So.
I read this. Like I had this funniest meme, which was like, if I was a billionaire, I would probably tell my enemies that I wake up at 4 a.m.
I really like that.
How much I feel. That's exactly how I feel. No, I'm definitely not an early riser. I'm also not the most structured person.
Okay.
Definitely not. I'm a work in progress, but like,
aren't we all?
Aren't we all? But like for me personally, how do I keep the momentum going? I think I am extremely, like I am very easily fascinated by stuff, and I think that is a big factor in it because, I don't know, for this whole tax thing, I never could have imagined it. And then like, you know, pouring days into, you know, learning how to, you know, how the tax system works or how like specific things in the tax system work. Suddenly like doing podcasts about the Grundsteuererklärung, and I've never even heard of the word a month prior, you know, is just something that I love. Like, you know, that if I'm really interested in something, like I think that I get that hyper focus, and I think I'm also quite easily fascinated by things. So the whole startup, the whole co-working space thing as well. Like suddenly it was like, okay, you had to understand the business model. How does the business model work? How does, you know, like what are the motivations of, you know, like your customers to move into a co-working space instead of an office space? How's the office space market? How do you manage like a renovation, the contracts, etc.
So like, if this stuff really excites you, just to learn something new and like understand how it works, and it's actually I
mean, some things more than others, right? Like I from the very beginning, I did say that the co-working space was more of a temporary thing because like
it was the rebound.
It was the thank you. It was the rebound.
Sorry.
It's so good. The comparison is so good. But it's no, because like the business model, like I like digital stuff, right? Like I like scalable things, and it's
not the most scalable business model.
Exactly.
It's brick and mortar. Or I don't know if brick and mortar is the right word, but it's a physical thing that's hard to scale.
It is the right word, right? Like we all saw what happened to WeWork, right? Like obviously scaling spaces is much better. There's way less of that, you know, like we company hype. So I mean, the business exists. We're sitting in one. So, no, and then so that was like a temporary thing, and I think that's the momentum but at the same time, like you also need a breather, like definitely. So I also afterwards I thought a lot about it, and I went to Amsterdam.
Oh, nice. Okay.
I moved to Amsterdam. Ex-colleague of mine from FoodPanda times, he founded a startup doing moving. Oh, interesting. Okay. And it was just the business was already established, and it was running. I did marketing again, so it was a little bit more my comfort zone, I would say. And that was but it wasn't at the same time because I moved somewhere else. And to me, it was like, after the whole scaling spaces and the Wonder Tax and then the scaling spaces rebound, I kind of like said, okay, maybe the next thing that I want to do should be a bit longer, long-term relationship. But
She's like, I'm saying something long-term now.
Exactly. And I and I couldn't see myself doing that in Berlin, like just because, I guess, gut feeling. So I went to Amsterdam, which was fantastic. The business itself was kind of more my comfort zone. So it was like a moving platform. So I also had some experience from Movinga, and I also knew my co-founder or colleague from FoodPanda times. So did that, but also at the same time had a different environment with Amsterdam and new language and stuff like that.
So it was just new experience, guys.
Experience,
which is a break as well. It's just you kind of leave this habitual environment that you've created a certain experience in, and now you're able to recreate something else. And I can understand how that could also be a bit more of a breather for you. And
I mean, it wasn't like we didn't work hard.
No, you were. Yeah, I was gonna say you were working.
But it was more of a comfort zone.
Yeah.
Decision as well.
So you do the moving platform for a while.
Yeah.
So how do you go? And this was your long-term relationship, but you left again. So how does it end up that you go back to your first love, Wonder Tax?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm sticking to this analogy.
So good. Yeah. Continue.
So how do we end up? How did that whole process happen? What happened in between? Which brought you back?
No, I mean the thing is what I described. The whole the buy and build strategy that we had, it was super interesting. I learned a bunch. I learned a lot. It was back to finance, doing all of the models again, but we wanted different things.
I see. Okay.
Out of the long-term relationship. I mean, I was there 4 years.
Yeah.
No, but it was super fun. It was good. It was a great learning experience. But then after having done that, I didn't see myself doing it long term, or else I would have gone into private equity or whatever. Okay. And I wanted to go back to my first love. No, I wanted to stay with marketing. So what I did was I started freelancing, and I did a bunch of interim CMO jobs, interim head of marketing, also just one-off advice kind of thing, or just recurring advisory role. Did that for about 5 months, and so I actually during that time I came back in touch with my old investors from back then. And, the high school sweetheart turned out to be the one.
Love it. Love this full circle moment.
I
was like, so how'd you swoon your way back in again? What was your...
So by the time my co-founder left again, my co-founder left the company, and there was a new CEO at the company. And he was leaving by the end of 2021. And... basically, like I said earlier, the investors, they didn't see the big unicorn potential at Wonder Tax anymore, and they didn't really have a plan what would happen after this guy leaves, and or I asked them, "What is your plan?" And they were like, "Okay, not very concrete." And then one thing led to another, and they were like, "Oh, but what are you doing right now?" And then I was like, well, I'm freelancing and I'm enjoying it quite a lot, playing hard to get.
I'm kind of busy.
I'm kind of busy right now.
Yeah.
But sure, let's grab a drink. And that's kind of, and then they made an offer where I was like, yeah, this might just work. Got in and saw massive potential. There was a lot to fix. Lots to do.
But you didn't just come back. You brought the band back together.
Yeah.
So it was you really brought it back to its roots a little bit.
So my back then head of marketing and back then senior engineer, Roman and Allah, met up with them and I was like, hey guys, Wonder Tax back on the table.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, that's a name I haven't heard in a long time. And they were like, what are you on about?
Yeah.
Like, and then I was like, no, I'm serious. This is happening. Like, there's a very big non-zero chance that I will be going back to Wonder Tax. Do you want to come? And they were like, hell yeah. And there was no real discussion about it. They were really excited as well. And yeah, we started January, so exactly 2 years ago. We started, all three of us, we started at Wonder Tax again.
I think what's interesting to me about a lot of the points in your journey is that it seems like you are also very good at building and maintaining relationships with key people. Yeah, because I mean, it was the relationship or friendships that brought you into going into FoodPanda and helped you transition to like scaling spaces and coming back to the organization again later on through your investors. And so maybe one of the questions I have for you there, especially now that we're towards the end, and I think relationship building is also very important. What is your, it's probably something you don't even do consciously, it's probably just your nature, but do you have how do you maintain the relationships that you've built? Are you constantly checking in with these people?
Not systematically.
Okay. It's like Tuesday at 3:00.
I would say, like, I mean, people remember you for things, right? Like, and I would say, my dad always said, don't close the door loudly. So if you leave something, don't burn bridges.
Don't close the door loudly. Don't burn bridges. Simple yet impactful advice. Thank you, Daniel, for joining for this episode and sharing your journey and all of your experiences with all of us. And to all of you listening, thank you for tuning in for this episode. It would mean the world to me if you would just take a second to like, follow, and share this podcast with others. Also, I would love to hear your feedback, so please do not hesitate to reach out to me directly at Janine@ontheupandup.io or leave a comment or review on this episode and share what you think. I'm really curious. With that being said, I can't wait to share the next episode with all of you. Until then, onwards and upwards, y'all, and speak to you then.